Programming languages often let you do the same thing in different ways, and knowing which way to choose can make a big difference in code clarity. Today, we'll study 10 ways to add up the values of an array in JavaScript. A simple task, but there's a lot to learn, I think. Now, get your editors ready and let's start to iterate through all of them. Get it? Because all methods need to iterate. Oh, no.
Gonna code, debug, and have fun. Coding with Radu, coding with Radu. Gonna prototype and design. Coding with Radu, coding with Radu. Let's code now.
I'm gonna do this small experiment in Visual Studio Code. So in an empty folder, I create a new file, index.html, and in it, a very basic HTML structure. It's just going to have the HTML tag and a head. And in the head, I'm going to add a script. This is where the magic will happen. So this sum.js file is what we are going to edit next. And in VS Code, if you control click, it's going to create you this file automatically next to index.html. Now, the most basic way to add up numbers in an array is to use a while loop. Code looks something like this. Let's call this method 1. And given the array, we are going to initialize sum to 0, and we're going to need an iterator also set to 0. And while this I is less than the array length, we increase the sum by array of I. We also increase I and return the sum. Now, to test, I'm going to go up here and define an array and add some random numbers in this. Maybe 25, 36, 4, 9, 100, 1, and 64. Okay, and below this, let's test our method 1. By calling it on the array, like this. Now, if you open index.html in a browser, it's going to be empty. But the magic happens in the developer tools, where we get this result 239 appearing here. So this is the sum using the while loop, and the while loop is really powerful. You can actually implement any algorithm using just while loops and assigning variables and things like that. But you don't need any other instructions. Even if-else statements can be implemented using while loops. All right, now we are going to do the same thing for 9 other methods. And let's prepare here for that. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And really, the only thing we will be running is this JavaScript file. So if you want, and if you have Node.js installed, you can also use a terminal here in VS Code and type there node sum.js. And it's going to give some error here because it gets to the point where it calls method 2 and method 2 doesn't exist. But the result that we had previously in the browser console is this one, and it appears before the error. And that's what we're interested in. The error will go away at the end when we have all methods implemented. Let's move on to method 2. It's going to look very similar to method 1, setting a sum to 0 and an I to 0. But now instead of a while loop, we'll do a do while loop. Do, and in it, it's pretty much the same thing as below. We increase the sum by array of I, we increase I, and the while appears here. So while I is less than array.length. and then return the sum. So this might look very similar. It's just rearranging things a little bit, and it does work the same. So if we run this again, now you get two numbers appearing there and they are the same value. But there is one significant difference, and that's that this piece of code will execute no matter what. Here it executes only if this condition is true. So for example, if we make our array so that it's empty, we're gonna see a difference here. And let me run this again. It's a 0 for the first case and not a number for the second case, because it tries here to add an undefined value to the sum, generating not a number. But here the sum stays 0, it's never getting modified. I'm gonna undo what I did here. It was just to test and show you the differences in the methods. And let's move on to method 3. Now this one is going to start off the same, but then we are going to use a for loop. Now the for loop is really nice when you know how many elements you're going to iterate through, and lets you write shorter code, like this. You can see what happens here is essentially setting I, increasing I, and doing the check are all happening on the same line here. That's saving the space. And now if we run, all of them do work in the same way. Now the next technique, method 4, uses recursion. And it's less intuitive for beginners and can also lead to Stack Overflow if you're not careful. Not the website. I'm referring to this thing right here. I'm writing now a stop condition where I'm returning 0. And then if it passes that, it does the recursive call here by adding to the array of 0 method 4 of array slice 1. This removes the first element of the array and returns a new array to method 4. So it calls itself again and again and again, always adding the result until it's empty, and then it adds one more 0, which doesn't disturb the sum. Let's run it. And we can see it works. Now, method 5. Given the array, let's set the sum as before to 0. And now we're also going to use a for loop, but we're going to use a for of loop. For every number of the array, we add it to the sum. And then we return the sum. And if we save and run again, we get all of them working in the same way. Now, this looks a little bit nicer than the for loop here because it's shorter, and also because it identifies the element in the array here as num, a number. This works, but if your code inside the for loop is going to be very long, it's wise to assign this to something so that it's easier to manage. And this one does it for you, so it's already shorter. It's also going to somehow force you to write nice code as a result. Now, there is an issue with this. If you ever need the index for some reason, this I here, you will have to do some extra work. Like maybe you want to add just the numbers on even positions, like 25 for 164. So you could easily modify this for loop here and check if I is even, basically, and only then do this addition here. But now you can't do that here. So if you need to do that, you have to add more code, define I, for example, and then go here and do the same check as before. Indent this, and remember also to increment I. And now the result for those two methods, 193, is going to be the same. But look at this one. It became much longer. It's much longer than this one now because the structure didn't have the index there to help you with. I'm just going to undo everything here. It was only for a demo. I want my methods to all work in the same way by the end of this lesson. And speaking of index, the next way is to use for in, which loops using the index as well. Very similar to the for of, but now what you get inside the loop is the index. So you have to add array of index in that not so nice way. But I guess this piece of code here is still shorter than this one here. And it works in pretty much the same way. The difference though is that if you give attributes to this array, like let's say we give it an age of 11, and now we run this again, all methods give 239 except for this one, which also loops through this age, through this property here. So this is more of a key here, not just the index of the array as you might assume. And the attribute here is age, and this would be 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on. Anyway, something for you to know, because if you expect it doesn't do that, and then you have this kind of structure for some reason, you can have unexpected behavior there. But if you don't, it's going to behave in the same way. And now you have the index. Now, method 7 is even shorter, setting the sum to 0. And now for each element of the array, we add that number to the sum and return the sum. So this is going to be like so. Same result, and it's a very popular way to iterate through arrays in JavaScript. It's a method of the array, and we pass here a callback function. So because we can write callback functions using this simple arrow function notation, you can really get away with it in one line like this, and it looks fine. Many people like it. I use it sometimes, but usually I do more things inside of this, so using a for of or a traditional for, I also do very often. There is also a problem with this. You can't break it. I mean, have a break inside of it and stop before it iterates through all elements. Like maybe you want to add items until you get to the number 4. If you go to any one of these methods, you could add things to the sum, but then if the number is 4, you can break. And when you do this, that method stopped as soon as it found 4. So now it's adding just 25, 36, and 4. You can't break inside of this one. So all of these methods really have pros and cons. I'm just going to remove this for consistency. And let's move on to method 8. Now this is very popular nowadays. It's to use the reduce method. What you need to do is pass a callback function with 2 parameters, an accumulator and a current value. And then you say that to the accumulator, you add the current value. Now the accumulator in the beginning, because we are doing a sum, we set it to 0, and that's our code. We have just one line here and we can return the value at the same time. I think reduce is nice once you get the hang of it, but once you get the hang of it, I see people using it for things that just become more complicated to read using reduce, and not everyone is comfortable using it. So I don't really recommend using it, because many of the questions I get asked is, what is that doing? What is that doing? What is that doing? It indicates that people are not that familiar with this way of writing code. And I'd say it depends on the coding environment you're working in. If there's a place where people use it a lot, you should use it to match whatever is there. Anyway, moving on. I'm kind of running out of ideas, and method 9, I don't recommend it at all. It looks like this. We are going to eval the array after joining it with the plus in between. So it works. And the reason it works is because here, essentially, if I'm gonna remove the eval, it generates a string that looks like this. And then it tells JavaScript to evaluate what is the result of that string. So if I undo here, the result is gonna be 239 again, and it works. But it's not recommended because of security issues that can come from this. Because eval is going to evaluate everything that you pass it here. And if somehow someone is giving you a weird value here inside of array, maybe let's replace this 100 with 1, and then semicolon, and let's alert something, do something bad, and then another semicolon, and continue with these numbers. So running now the code, it's definitely gonna break the other methods as well. But look what happens here. We have a summation, and then we have another instruction here, and then we have another summation. So alert is not defined here, but if I'm gonna open it in the browser and refresh the page, we're gonna get an alert. The browser actually behaves in this weird way. So that's what the security thing can mean. Of course, JavaScript can do many other weird things if you just evaluate it like that as well. So don't do it. Just because it's possible doesn't mean you should do it. And this last method we're gonna implement, don't use this either. This is just a weird thing I had to come up to have 10 things here. And I'm not even gonna explain it. Why it works, you have to figure it out and explain it to me. And the first to give a complete answer will get a free channel membership for 1 month. So it looks like this. Oh, I forgot to replace this one with 100 as it was before. So running again, and all 10 methods now work as expected. Thanks for watching, and see you guys.